Severe Atlantic storms batter the British coast and English Channel every winter, and the winter of 2002 is no exception. On February the 2nd, the general cargo vessel Kodima suffers an engine breakdown in bad weather conditions close to the coast. The vessel needs assistance. Luckily, a Wijsmuller tug is close by. This is the story of the Kodima's salvage.
A 6,000-ton freighter is drifting towards the Cornish coast tonight
just down the
after
coast
a Russian
here, off
crew
the coast of Cornwall. And that was that a Maltese registered cargo ship carrying timber raised the alarm just after 5 o'clock this morning. It was called the Kodima. There were 16 people on board.
Royal Navy helicopters from Culdrose were scrambled off the southwest coast when a Maltese-flagged ship began sinking in mountainous seas off St. Austell. 16 Russian sailors were airlifted to safety and taken to Cornwall.
Coast Guards warned that timber washed from the decks could pose a threat to shipping. They've been trying to get a line to the vessel, but those efforts have failed, and tonight, with tugs still on standby, the Kodima has run aground. The salvage operation will now be launched. Daniel Bircher, BBC News.
The salvage operation of the grounded vessel is handed over to Wijsmuller Salvage, a part of Svitzer Wijsmuller. At the Wijsmuller Salvage Centre in IJmuiden, in the Netherlands, preparations begin immediately. A Wijsmuller salvage team is sent to the site of the casualty. Already, while Kodima was still adrift, the Lloyd's Open Form 2000 Scopik Incorporated was signed. The Svitzer Wijsmuller tug Sigun was based near the location of the casualty and was soon behind the vessel. Every possible attempt was made to connect up to the abandoned ship. However, bad weather and waves up to 7 meters prevented boarding of the Kodima. Tug Sigun followed the vessel until it finally ran aground near Plymouth in Cornwall. The Kodima is firmly aground with her stern to the sea. The list decreased to about 30 degrees. Close to the casualty, the tug Sigun is on standby. At first daylight on February the 3rd, the Wijsmuller salvage team is airlifted to the casualty for the initial onboard inspection. However, due to deterioration in the weather situation and the incoming high tide, the crew is not able to board the vessel. Based on the first flyover, the salvage team can report that the engine room seems to be flooded. Holds 3 and 4 are flooded. Water is running over the portside deck. The situation is reported to the UK Secretary of State representative and his team members. First priority is given to inspect the conditions of the vessel and to prevent any oil pollution. Later in the afternoon, the team succeeds in boarding the vessel. The first onboard inspection is carried out with the following main findings. Engine room is flooded and remains flooded with water above water level outside. Holds 1 to 4 are flooded. In hold number 4, most of the cargo has disappeared and part of the hatches are missing. The list of the vessel is 15 degrees. The 24-hour salvage operation is coordinated from the Wijsmuller Salvage Emergency Response Centre in the Netherlands. In the evening, additional salvage equipment is loaded on a truck departing for England. At the same time, tug Sigun enters the port of Plymouth for briefing of the crew and to get a floating rope on board. In the following days, the weather is appearing to ease slightly. The forecast indicates a short period of potential workable weather. However, bad weather can be expected during the coming days. The salvage team is taking a first batch of equipment on board the vessel. This enables the crew to install the necessary blind flanges on the vent pipes. Careful actions are taken to prevent the seepage of fuel oil from the vessel. At the port of Plymouth, the salvage equipment from IJmuiden has arrived. After inspection, it is transferred onto the site of the casualty. The rough sea makes it impossible to work with vessels close to the casualty. The only possibility is to airlift the salvage equipment to the stranded ship. Close to the casualty is an old military installation, Fort Tregantle. The parking lot inside the fort is used as a base for preparing equipment to be slung over to the ship by helicopter. A carefully planned load of salvage equipment and supplies are ready. Spare gear must be available in case equipment is lost or damaged during transport, or at operations on the vessel. On February the 7th, the plans are to start airlifting the equipment to the vessel. However, after the helicopter has lifted the salvage crew to the vessel, the weather is once again getting worse. The helicopter is forced to land at the fort, leaving the salvage crew on the vessel.
If it gets worse, then...
It is probably a question of sooner rather than later. With the weather, it looks like it might be getting worse. Yeah. Yes. There is a possibility that the weather could close in more than it is at the moment.
We looked initially at the stern this morning. The hover references were sufficient, not ideal, but what put me off completely was on 2 or 3 occasions we saw waves hitting the stern.
It takes a Sea King helicopter from the Royal Navy Rescue to pick up the salvage crew again from Kodima. This aircraft is better equipped to operate in extreme weather conditions. The following day's bad weather prevents the helicopter from flying. On the 9th of February, the weather is finally getting a little better, allowing operations to begin as planned.
Wat we nu voorgesteld hebben is dus dat we met 4 man gaan. Van Handwijk kan die kijken.
The Wijsmuller salvage crew on the site consists of 13 men, highly skilled and each with their own speciality. In charge of the operation is a salvage master. A designated salvage officer handles the contact with the local authorities and with the owners of the ship. It is indicated that the vessel is to be delivered to the harbour of Falmouth, about 40 miles southwest of the grounding position. The Wijsmuller salvage naval architect arrives from IJmuiden. Further investigations have to be carried out in order to prepare the plan for refloating of the vessel. The content of the fuel tanks is checked. Water came in through ventilation pipes damaged by the strong sea. Inspection of water and oil levels in fuel tanks is done by lowering down a measuring tape and applying chemicals. The engine room is inspected and pump positions are planned. Water mixed with oil makes the floor and plating extremely slippery. The 20% list of the ship adds to the problems of moving around. In the afternoon of February the 11th, bad weather is building up again, and the salvage crew is once again forced to leave the ship. The next day, the stranded vessel almost disappears in the strong wind and rain. No flying today.
Ja, we staan hier gewoon op het helikopterplatform even in die auto's blijven onder schudden. Rechte regen hebben hier. Dan voor die verhalen. Nou.
The massive hydraulic pumps have arrived and the crew is moving them to the parking lot. These pumps also have to be airlifted to the vessel. A local blacksmith is employed to construct iron frames, which will support the pumps while they're being used on board the vessel.
What size hollow squares? We will take the measurements.
Okay, so if we... Pardon?
We have to get the sling as well.
I'll get you.
Drawings of Kodima have been obtained, and at the hotel, the crew is in discussion on how to proceed further with the salvage operation. The main issue is the remaining oil in the fuel tanks of the grounded vessel. There are two possibilities. The first is to let the oil stay in the tanks during reflotation. The alternative is to remove the oil from the fuel tanks beforehand. However, removing the oil to another vessel, especially in bad weather conditions, might be dangerous and thus be a threat to the environment. The weather is finally getting better, enabling the salvage crew and the helicopter to continue their work. Back on the ship, the power of the sea is very obvious. This is how a part of the hatch of hold number 4 looked when the ship was abandoned on February the 11th. 2 days later, after the storm, the solid steel hatch has been bent like a piece of paper. Timber is cleared from the deck in order to make the working area more accessible. On the beaches are loads of timber originating from the vessel. Beaches close to Plymouth are precious and quite popular, especially during summertime. As a consequence, environmental organisations as well as the English authorities follow the salvage operation closely.
Very popular because in the north coast, south coast of Cornwall, people come from all over the UK. It's the best surfing in the UK. So depending on the weather, they'll either go to the north coast or the south coast. And this is one of the best.
The foremast on Kodima is cut in such a way that it stays on board, but without interfering with helicopter operations. The helicopter is capable of lifting 2.5 tons. The heavy hydraulic pump power packs press the helicopter to the limit. The salvage team is making arrangements to establish power on the ship by means of generators. The forward generator is started and connected up with wiring. Also, a compressor is connected for the use of mobile winches. hoses and pumps are placed in position and tested. Small pumps have emptied the upper part of the engine room, and larger pumps are lowered further down into the engine room. The placing of pumps in the engine room is a difficult operation due to the inflow of water mixed with fuel oil. Pumps of hold number 1 are already operating and emptying the hold. At the port of Plymouth, the Wijsmuller tug Battle Axe has arrived. The vessel takes on board oil dispersant for use in its spray boom. In case the situation at the grounded vessel deteriorates, this equipment will be used for oil pollution abatement. Additional equipment for this use is ready on the quay as well. Also in the harbour, the small tanker Withask is on standby in case the fuel oil on Kodima has to be transferred. Back on Fort Tregantle, the blacksmith's custom-made iron frames are ready.
Right, what you're going to have to do is get that frame with these in the water, in the holes.
Yes.
Get the frame so with the tagline so they can turn it.
The iron frames that hold the pumps have been custom made to fit on the hatch coamings, allowing the pumps to be lowered further down into the flooded holds. The pumps are connected to the hydraulic power packs and tested. The scene is now set for the oncoming operation. Dive inspections are made around the ship. Special attention is aimed at the lost hatches. The sea is now rather calm, allowing tug Sigun to come in close to Kodima for transfer of personnel and equipment. On the evening of February the 15th, a part of the salvage team departs with the tug, leaving a skeleton team overnight on Kodima. Later the same evening, as tug Sigun is entering the port of Plymouth, a meeting is held together with the UK Secretary of State representative. A Wijsmuller salvage officer is informing the authorities about the final procedures of the salvage operation. The plan is to refloat the Kodima tomorrow. It is decided to refloat the vessel with the fuel oil remaining inside the ship.
During those dive inspections, it was determined or it was possible to find 2 of the hatches. So we found 2 of the hatches. They're next to the ship and they're buoyed off. So if everything is okay, the buoys stay there. You can easily identify them and pick them up.
At the hotel, the naval architect is making the last calculations to trim the oncoming operation. Next morning at first light, tug Battle Axe is taking the salvage crew back to Kodima.
Begin, Battle Axe.
The day of the refloating operation is finally here. As the tug arrives, the salvage crew on Kodima has already started the pumps in the engine room. The tug Sigun is connected at the stern of the casualty. Tug Battleaxe is connected up at the starboard bow to keep Kodima off the underwater hatch covers on the port side of the vessel. The refloating operation is coordinated closely with the tide and the weather forecast. The main pumps are activated at 10:30 in the morning. The basic principle of the plan is to refloat Kodima by recreating its buoyancy. The holds and engine room of the vessel are flooded. As the tide lowers, the pumps are activated. First, hold number 1 and the engine room are dewatered. As the tide drops, it is possible to start dewatering hold 3, 4 and 2. The vessel is then refloated by the incoming high tide. The Kodima is brought into an overall floating condition, whereafter the tugs can move the vessel out. The operation thus is not one with refloating by pulling force, but one in which the vessel is moved only when the ship is floating in a stable condition. Time for a last coffee break on the listed vessel. The salvage crew is awaiting the tide to complete their job. Soon it will show if the preparations and calculations have been done right. For now, all they can do is to wait. The clinometer on the bridge of Kodima still shows a 14 degrees list. Slowly, very slowly, the vessel starts moving. The salvage master orders tug Sigun to pull with 40% of its power.
Just give it a little bit of stern power just to keep the bow steady so we can steer it a little bit. Battleaxe, Roger. 1720, okay, thank you.
Slowly, tug Sigun pulls the vessel away from the English coastline, while tug Battleaxe is steering at the bow. Kodima has been refloated. Power is established on the bridge of Kodima by the generators that were brought in earlier. The vessel is prepared for her night voyage towards the port of Falmouth. In the engine room, the salvage crew is preparing to treat parts of the engine with chemicals to reduce damage done by the salt water. Under the guidance of the towmaster, tug Sigun is leading the convoy towards Falmouth. Tug Battleaxe at the stern is also acting as a pollution response vessel with the necessary equipment on board. As the ships approach the harbour of Falmouth, the local port harbour tugs connect up. Kodima is redelivered to her owners. Yet another Wijsmuller salvage operation has been completed successfully.